Toronto was stunned when police issued a Canada-wide warrant for Ethan Ross, a respected businessman turned suspected killer. What began as the investigation into Daniel Moore's mysterious death spiraled into a nationwide manhunt involving Detective Sarah Collins, forensic expert Mark Doyle, and profiler Linda Graves. As each clue uncovered a darker secret, it became clear Ethan wasn't just running. He was hiding something far worse. From the quiet streets of Toronto to the frozen wilderness of Alberta, every step brought the team closer to a chilling truth. The question wasn't if they'd catch him, but what they'd find when they did. The morning began like any other in downtown Toronto. The sun rose over the skyline, lighting up the glass towers and quiet streets below. But inside a luxury apartment near Yonge Street, an unsettling silence filled the air. It was broken only when a cleaner, arriving for her usual morning shift, unlocked the door to a scene she would never forget. The room smelled faintly of iron and cleaning products, but it was the sight before her that froze her in terror. A man lying motionless on the living room floor, blood pooling beneath him, his face pale and lifeless. Within minutes, police sirens echoed through the city as officers sealed off the area. The victim was soon identified as Daniel Moore, a 32-year-old tech consultant who had returned from a business trip just 2 days earlier. Friends described him as intelligent, kind, and ambitious, someone with a bright future ahead. He had no criminal history, no known enemies, and lived a quiet life. But inside his apartment, detectives found signs of something dark and deliberate. Expensive electronics were missing, drawers were left half open, and a shattered glass lay near the kitchen sink. But there was no sign of forced entry. Whoever had entered that apartment had been let in willingly. The forensics team worked meticulously, photographing every inch of the scene. Under the light of the camera flash, a single fingerprint stood out on the broken glass. It didn't belong to Daniel. Detectives had seen scenes like this before, but something about the precision and calmness disturbed them. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was something more personal. As news spread, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Daniel was well-liked and had no enemies, but rumors quickly began to swirl. Some said it was a jealous lover, others believed it was a robbery by a stranger. Police combed through Daniel's phone records, text messages, and financial transactions. One name kept reappearing: Ethan Ross. At first it meant nothing, but when they ran the unidentified fingerprint through the national database, the match was instant. The print belonged to Ethan, a 28-year-old man with a record for fraud, theft, and assault. Detectives dug deeper into his background. Ethan had been drifting between jobs and cities, living under fake names, always staying one step ahead of the law. He had met Daniel several months ago through a business networking event. Witnesses remembered seeing them together multiple times, often in heated conversations. Now one was dead, and the other had vanished. Police searched Ethan's last known address, but the apartment was empty. Only a few personal items remained: a half-empty suitcase, a burned-out cigarette, and a torn photo of Daniel with his face scratched out. To the detectives, it was more than evidence. It was a message. As the day faded into night, officers issued a citywide alert for Ethan Ross. They didn't yet know that this was only the beginning, that a single murder in a downtown apartment would soon spark one of the most intense manhunts Canada had ever seen. Ethan Ross had always been a man who slipped through cracks. He was smart, resourceful, and uncomfortably calm under pressure. Growing up in small-town Ontario, he learned early how to manipulate people to survive. He was the kind of person who could earn your trust in minutes and betray you just as quickly. After leaving home at 17, he lived a transient life, drifting between cities, working odd jobs, and leaving a trail of lies behind him. Fraud charges, theft, and identity scams followed wherever he went. Yet somehow, he always managed to escape capture. To most, he was invisible. To the police, he was just another small-time criminal who would resurface eventually. But this time was different. Daniel Moore wasn't just another stranger who crossed Ethan's path. They met during a tech conference where Daniel was presenting a new cybersecurity project. Ethan, posing as a digital consultant, had managed to charm his way into Daniel's professional circle. At first their interactions seemed friendly, even opportunistic. Daniel believed Ethan could help him expand his business, and for months they worked closely on projects and investments. But as Daniel's trust deepened, Ethan saw an opening, a chance to exploit his partner financially. Detectives discovered that Daniel had wired thousands of dollars to a fake company account under Ethan's control. When Daniel realized what had happened, he confronted him. According to messages recovered from Daniel's phone, their relationship soured quickly. Ethan promised to pay him back, but his words were hollow. The situation escalated when Daniel threatened to expose Ethan's fraud to the authorities. That confrontation, investigators believed, was the breaking point. While police pieced together the timeline, Ethan was already gone. He left his apartment the night before Daniel's body was discovered, taking with him only essentials: cash, a fake ID, and Daniel's stolen watch. Surveillance footage showed him boarding a bus at Union Station heading west. From that moment, he vanished into Canada's vast landscape. Detectives worked around the clock, tracing his route through bank withdrawals, camera footage, and witness accounts. In a diner outside of Thunder Bay, a waitress remembered a man matching Ethan's description: polite, quiet, wearing gloves even while eating. Another sighting came from a motel in Manitoba, where the owner noticed a guest paying cash and leaving before dawn. Each clue confirmed the same chilling fact: Ethan was still one step ahead. The media caught wind of the story, labeling it the cross-country hunt. Toronto police released Ethan's photo nationwide, urging the public to report any sightings. But days turned into weeks with no breakthrough. Ethan's ability to disappear seemed almost calculated. He changed his appearance frequently, trimming his hair, growing a beard, wearing second-hand clothes. He knew how police worked, how long it took for warrants to spread, and how to exploit the gaps in communication between jurisdictions. Behind the scenes, detectives were growing increasingly anxious. They feared Ethan wouldn't stop at one murder. He had nothing to lose now. No identity, no home, no reason to trust anyone. The Canada-wide warrant was issued, marking him as one of the country's most wanted fugitives. What had started as a single crime in a Toronto apartment had now become a national manhunt. And somewhere out there, Ethan Ross was watching the headlines, smiling at how well he had vanished once again. The manhunt for Ethan Ross stretched across provinces, turning into a relentless chase that gripped the entire nation. Every major news outlet ran his photo: a pale face with sharp features, and the distinctive tattoo on his left hand. His name became synonymous with fear, and for weeks, Canadians watched as law enforcement scrambled to close in on him. Despite the wide coverage, Ethan remained a ghost. Each lead turned cold just as fast as it appeared. He knew how to travel unnoticed, how to blend in, and how to use the chaos of modern life to his advantage. Ethan moved west, using freight trains and rural back roads to avoid surveillance. He paid in cash, used discarded phones, and stole identities from those he met along the way. In Calgary, he stayed at a rundown hostel under the name Mark Turner, pretending to be a construction worker looking for jobs. He kept to himself, rarely speaking except when necessary. The people around him never realized they were living next to a wanted murderer. Meanwhile, Toronto detectives were uncovering more about Ethan's motives. Forensic teams found encrypted files on Daniel Moore's recovered laptop. After days of decryption, investigators discovered that Ethan had stolen not just money, but classified business data that Daniel had been developing for an international client. It appeared that Daniel had discovered the theft and planned to expose him publicly. That confrontation might have been the moment Ethan decided that killing him was the only way to protect himself. Police now had a clear motive: greed, fear, and control. They also realized that Ethan had planned his escape long before committing the crime. He had withdrawn cash in small amounts over several weeks, creating a safety net to fund his disappearance. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was cold, deliberate, and methodical. Across the country, Ethan continued to adapt. He changed his hairstyle, grew a beard, and swapped clothing with strangers. He lived off the grid, camping in forests, scavenging from dumpsters, and using the stolen identities of missing people. His ability to survive in plain sight made him nearly impossible to trace. Yet, his overconfidence would soon become his downfall. In a small town outside Edmonton, Ethan stopped at a convenience store late one night. He bought food and a prepaid phone. The store's security camera caught a brief glimpse of his tattoo as he paid. When the footage reached authorities, they confirmed it was him. It was the first verified sighting in nearly a month. Police quickly flooded the area, setting up roadblocks and checking vehicles. But Ethan had already disappeared into the wilderness once more, leaving only his fingerprints on the counter. Each near capture frustrated investigators, but they refused to give up. The RCMP joined forces with provincial police, creating a special task force focused solely on tracking Ethan down. The chase was no longer just about solving a murder. It had become a battle of persistence. As the hunt intensified, Ethan's calm exterior began to crack. The isolation, the sleepless nights, and the constant fear of being caught started to wear him down. He became careless, leaving traces behind, receipts, footprints, and sightings reported by locals. The man who once prided himself on control was slowly losing it. And while he thought he was still in charge, the net around him was tightening. Somewhere deep in the Canadian wilderness, the most wanted man in the country was running out of places to hide. Snow had begun to fall across Alberta when Ethan Ross made his biggest mistake yet. He sought refuge in an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of Jasper, believing he could wait out the police search. The property was old, with peeling paint, broken windows, and a faint smell of rot. To Ethan it was perfect, remote, forgotten, and surrounded by dense forest. He scavenged what little food remained in the cupboards and used a cracked fireplace for warmth. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of control return. But control, as he would soon learn, was an illusion. Back in Toronto, the task force had uncovered more chilling details about Ethan's past. He had a pattern, a series of unexplained disappearances linked to people who had crossed him in business. It became clear that Daniel Moore wasn't his first victim, just the first to leave enough evidence behind. Investigators began piecing together Ethan's history, uncovering shell companies, fake passports, and suspicious insurance claims. The more they learned, the darker his profile became. Ethan wasn't a desperate man on the run. He was a calculating predator who had built his entire life on deceit. The nationwide manhunt reached a breaking point when a park ranger near Jasper reported signs of recent activity in an abandoned house. Fresh footprints, remnants of a fire, and food wrappers were discovered nearby. The prints matched Ethan's boots from a prior surveillance photo. Within hours, dozens of officers surrounded the area. Helicopters circled above, using infrared cameras to detect movement through the snow-covered terrain. The quiet mountain town transformed into the center of a high-stakes operation. Inside the farmhouse, Ethan sensed something was wrong. The distant thrum of helicopter blades and faint radio chatter echoed through the cold air. He peered through a cracked window and saw faint lights moving through the trees. Panic struck him. They had found him. He quickly packed his things, grabbed his backpack, and slipped out through the back door into the forest. His breath came in shallow bursts, his hands shaking as he tried to stay silent. For hours he moved through the woods, guided only by the moonlight reflecting off the snow. But the terrain was unforgiving. Each step crunched loudly beneath his boots, leaving a clear trail behind. He knew the cold would slow him down, yet stopping meant capture. The once confident fugitive was now reduced to a man trembling in fear of every sound. By dawn, the police found his makeshift camp, still warm from the fire he had started the night before. A discarded knife and a blood-stained cloth hinted that he might have been injured during his escape. The task force knew they were close, closer than ever before. Ethan's physical strength began to fade as exhaustion took over. Frost clung to his clothes, and hunger gnawed at him. He stumbled into a ravine, injuring his leg, and crawled beneath a fallen tree for cover. There, surrounded by silence and snow, he realized he had nowhere left to run. The man who once evaded law enforcement for months was now trapped by the very wilderness he had used to hide. As officers tightened their perimeter, following the trail of footprints and broken branches, Ethan's story neared its inevitable end. The chase that had captivated an entire country was finally drawing to a close, and all that remained was the reckoning. The final moments of Ethan Ross's escape unfolded in eerie silence. The forest, blanketed in white, seemed to hold its breath. He lay under the fallen tree, his legs swollen and his clothes frozen stiff. The cold had become unbearable, but his mind refused to surrender. He clutched the stolen passport and the wad of cash in his pocket as if they were lifelines. In his delusion, he believed he could still make it to the border. He imagined crossing into the United States, blending into a small town, starting over under a new name. But fate had other plans. At sunrise, the sound of boots crunching through the snow echoed through the valley. The officers had followed his footprints, narrowing the distance with each careful step. A K-9 unit picked up his scent and barked wildly, pulling toward the ravine. Ethan stirred, realizing he had been found. He tried to move, but his body refused to cooperate. Every muscle burned, his vision blurred, and his heartbeat slowed. The adrenaline that had carried him this far was finally gone. Still, he refused to be taken alive. He crawled toward a nearby stream, hoping to wash away his trail, but his hands trembled too violently. When the first officer spotted him through binoculars, they knew it was over. Within minutes, the area was surrounded. Drones hovered overhead, and the blinding beams of tactical flashlights cut through the mist. Ethan's breathing grew shallow. The sound of commands shouted in the distance barely reached his ears. The cold, exhaustion, and guilt weighed down on him like a heavy stone. As officers closed in, Ethan looked around one last time. The same mountains that once offered him refuge now stood as silent witnesses to his downfall. He thought about the people he had hurt, the lives he had destroyed, and the city he had fled. For the first time, he felt the full weight of what he had done. He realized there was no escape, not from the law, and not from himself. When the officers reached him, they found Ethan unconscious, clutching a small photo of his family. He was rushed to a hospital under tight security, where he remained in critical condition for 2 days before regaining consciousness. The moment he opened his eyes, detectives were there, ready to take his statement. But Ethan said nothing. He stared at the ceiling, his expression blank, as if he had already accepted his fate. The trial that followed became one of the most publicized in Canadian history. Evidence recovered from his Toronto apartment connected him to multiple unsolved cases. Hidden hard drives revealed a trail of manipulation and greed stretching back over a decade. Victims' families filled the courtroom, some seeking justice, others simply wanting closure. Ethan listened to every word but never spoke. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, he didn't flinch. Years later, his name became a cautionary tale in law enforcement training. The case of Ethan Ross was remembered not just for the brutality of his crimes, but for the relentless pursuit that brought him down. The man who once believed he could outsmart the system became proof that no one can escape forever. As the prison gates closed behind him, Canada exhaled. The manhunt was over, but the scars he left behind would never fade. The case of Ethan Ross exposed how a single man's deception could unravel across an entire country. Behind his charm and success hid a mind capable of unimaginable cruelty. The tireless work of Detective Sarah Collins and her team proved that justice, though delayed, always arrives, even when hidden beneath layers of lies. Ethan's downfall was not just the end of a manhunt, but a reminder that evil can wear a familiar face. If this story gripped you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real-life inspired true crime documentaries.